All right, guys, welcome back. So, thank God for foresight. I bought these collets a while back, and I'm going to need to put them on this rotor, on this shaft, because I needed to sand the shaft down in order to fit these bearings. They were too tight. I didn't have to take much off. I mean, they were supposed to be the same size, but we know how that is the reality. A 2x4 isn't really a 2x4. And these 22 millimeter by 8 millimeter OD are probably right on, but this shaft isn't. So it was a little bit more than 8 millimeters. So a little sanding. And in doing so, the shaft used to fit snugly on the rotor housing, but now it's a little bit too loose. Not loose to the point where it's going to wobble around, but loose enough that it will just slide right out. So I've got these collets. So once I get those hooked up and I get the bottom bearing cap for the maglev portion of this on, I can then screw on the bearing housings for the top and bottom and get this guy going. So stay tuned. All right. Who has enough foresight to see what's wrong with this picture? So I turn this and it seems to be okay, but watch what happens when I stop it. This turns on the shaft, which is okay, I guess, but then when this thing gets up to high speed, if it's not turning the same speed as the shaft, it's going to wear on the PLA. It'll melt the PLA. PLA is not good with heat. And besides, I don't want it to do that. I want the shaft to turn as well as but you can see when I turn this, yeah, I can't get these two to sandwich it tight enough. So it looks like I'm going to have to put some sort of sleeve in between the housing hole and the actual shaft, which negates the use for these, but I'll probably still keep them on there just for safety reasons. But yeah, I didn't think about that until after I started spinning it, and I realized, uh-oh, it's spinning on the shaft. Duh. All right, so I really don't want to use any glue. I mean, it's a nice snug fit, but it's not snug enough. Like I said, this spins. So I'm trying to figure out, usually when I talk it out loud like this, I come up with an idea. I don't want to use glue because I want to be able to take the shaft out. Oh, I think I just thought of something. If I put a spiked lock washer underneath this, that's it. I'll put something that'll grip this underneath this collet. That'll work. So I can glue the collet to, or the lock washer, you know, those spiky lock washers. I can glue the collet to one of those, then slide it on, push it together really tight, then tighten it up. Or even better, get one of those springed lock washers in between that and the spiky one, so that when I push this down on it, it'll be pushing against it. See, I always think better when I talk it out loud. All right, so these were the guys I was talking about. And what I'm going to do is every other tang, I'm going to bend in the opposite direction so that it'll really grip the PLA housing. And then I need something that's kind of springy. And I could just use a regular lock washer. They have a spring, but it's a little too hard. I could just use a spring, But I'll think of something. Welcome back. So my wife is amazing sometimes. I'll run some of this stuff by her, and she came up with the perfect solution. So instead of putting a spring in between this collet and this washer, which will grip this, she said, why don't you put a rubber washer in between these two? That way, not only will this grip the washer, but the rubber washer will grip that, and I'll be able to collapse it, and I won't need any glue at all. I think that idea is going to work. Yeah, sometimes it takes a fresh mind to come up with a simple solution. Stay tuned. So even though that idea would probably work, in doing that, I came up with a better idea, one that won't involve any glue or anything. I can simply, I can simply 3D print a flat piece that'll, like a washer, that I could screw to this and attach to this, or even attach to this rubber seal. And this rubber seal is so tight on this shaft that it'll be good enough. Or what I could just do is glue the rubber seal to this, because then I'm not gluing it to the shaft. I'm simply gluing it to the body here. Yeah, that even makes more sense, because, yeah, this rubber is super tight. And that's good enough to keep it spinning. But I'll have to see if I stopped it with my hand, of course it's going to not grip that well. But yeah, I actually have several ideas that'll work, but they all came from talking it out loud, discussing it with somebody else, i.e. my wife, and getting other ideas. That's not trying to think of it all yourself, taking suggestions from people who watch your videos, like G-Law or Magnus Attractus now had a, and I knew he was going to come up with this too. So I have these facing out, north, south, north, south. Well, what if I faced them all in one direction? Or I set them in a hallback type situation where I can have north, south, or north, south, north, south, north, south. You know what I mean? And I can do that because I'm not gluing any of this. And I'm definitely going to try that. I knew he would come up with something like that. He always has great suggestions, as well as the rest of you guys. Anyway, let me get this. Oh, God, there's a freaking gnat flying around here. Let me get this done and figure it out the right way so that I can get it together. Stay tuned. Welcome back. It turns out I don't even think I need the collet. I can simply put this undersized rubber washer. I could glue it to here, which I don't mind. And this fits so tightly on this shaft, that there's no way. And I can still use the collet just to, keep it in its right position. But this fits so tightly on the shaft that I don't need any glue or even these washers, these spiky washers. I don't even need those. So yeah, one question leads to an answer, which leads to another answer, which leads to another. And actually, now that I think of it, I thought of several ways I could temporarily, which is the key word, hook this shaft to this rotor. So yeah, you don't always have to think of the stuff yourself. You reach out and you get some really good ideas sometimes. All right, welcome back. So I don't even need the collets. I went and got these rubber washers that are a kind of dome shape, and I I made sure that the hole was tremendously undersized and pushed this rod through. I still have the collet on this side, and it is tight. It's not going to loosen up at all. So from one idea to another, to another, to another. I'm probably going to keep the collet on there just in case. I'll put one on the other side, but I really don't need it. All right, so I think I'm going to have to make this part smaller, actually shorter, and I won't be able to put that collet on that end there because of the space here, or I need to take the bottom bearing out so it won't have 4 bearings. This has 4 bearings, just like the vertical beast, but it's looking good, and it's lifting off of that bottom magnet in a maglev type thing, and I mean, I barely spun this thing, and it doesn't even have the top bearing on it. So I'm going to have to figure something out here. I either have to print that much shorter, which is no big deal, or I got to take the top bearing off or the bottom bearing. Instead of having 4 on there, I'll just have 2, one on the bottom, one on the top. Yeah, I'm gonna have to check this out. All right, so I don't think even shortening that guy's gonna work, because I think basically this guy is just too thick for this setup. What I'm gonna have to do is put more washers, more plastic washers underneath these risers to make this taller, which is again, no big deal. Or I could just I don't even have to do that. I could put them up here, which would make it taller. Because I'm right at the limit there, and I don't like that. That's too close. That's too close. So I'm going to pull it back down so that I have more space there. And then just put some risers on here. Yeah, because I want at least that much space between the rubber grommet or the rubber O-ring and the top of the bearing. Yeah, I want some floating space. So I'm going to have to raise these up. I'm going to have to print out a few more of these, or just get some metal ones. I really don't want to use metal. Anyway, stay tuned. I'm going to have to print out at least 1-inch spacers. I can't get away with just doing a couple of washers, which means I'm also going to have to get some longer brass screws, which means I'm not going to complete this bad boy today like I thought I would. I just don't have enough time to go to Ace and get that stuff. Because this thing turned out to be a little bit fatter than I thought it would. So while I'm printing out some spacers for that, I'll also print out a smaller one of those, which I don't really need to. But yeah, this guy's just a little bit too fat. When I measured it, I didn't take into account the bearing and the rubber grommet and the whole 9 yards. And in actuality, I should probably make it about 1.25 inches, because an inch will give me a little bit of space, but I want some buffer. So let me print out. It's going to take a while too. All right, guys, sorry about that. Stay tuned.